Thank you, everyone. And it is really good to be back in Dallas. I lived here for 20 years, and I consider it one of my homes. And for those in the audience who don't know me, I have a number of friends here, and they can tell you the true story about these events after I get done. So, I became today I'm going to talk about being an entrepreneur at AT&T, which is kind of like a pseudo-entrepreneur. I'm going to tell you a little bit about being an entrepreneur at a true startup company, what you would think in the audience is an entrepreneur. And then I'm an entrepreneur today. I joined a company that had zero commercial revenue and spending $70 million a year and was around for 10 years, and how we made that. And it's all these adventures are how we did it together. I don't really talk about this in this talk, but what makes you become an entrepreneur? And I only can answer that question for myself. Part of it was trying to prove to myself I was as good as I thought I was. I found out I was as good as I thought I was. But, there's something really special about knowing it was you. And that, when you work at a big company like AT&T, it's often difficult to understand what's the company and what's you. But when you start a company on your own, you know. There's also the creative process. To look at something, to go into a central office, or today to walk into an Amazon distribution center and sit there and realize with your friends and folks you work with every day that you made this happen. It's such a cool feeling. And I think that's, from the first time I walked into a central office and saw a power supply I designed, that feeling I still enjoy today. And the third reason, which motivates many entrepreneurs, I wanted to make more money than I was making. And that drove me into entrepreneurship too. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got there. So I don't have it as the first item, but I was a hotel manager before I finished college. And it was not the best hotel in the world. But I got to tell you, the experience of having to deal with customers at 3 o'clock in the morning and the heat goes out in the building and you're the only person there to deal with it, you learn a lot about sales and how to deal with customers and how to build businesses and keep people around. It probably was the best experience of my life at 21 years old. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was really fortunate. But I also was smart enough to leave the hotel business. And I went to Temple University, which is a blue-collar university. We were all commuters, and I'm a blue-collar type of guy. I considered myself at one time, the people's CEO, like Muhammad Ali was the people's champion. And I think from that Temple experience, you really learned how to deal with people who were working 40 hours a week, going to school, trying to find a way to get ahead, people first generation. I think that was really beneficial in my life. And luckily, Bell Labs hired me. And Bell Labs, back in 1982, I see some Bell Labs alumni here, was like working for Google. I mean, that was the place to be. And the labs was wonderful for me. They paid for my education here at SMU. They let me work on really cool things. They sent me away for my master's in electrical engineering at Duke University. And there's no way I would be here today without my experience at Bell Labs. We went off, started our own company. One of my co-founders, Vito Savino, is here tonight. Vito, I'm going to tell more about our story and journey we took starting a company. And then after the success at Faleer, I went off and joined a company, Plug Power, which had infinite opportunities as well as infinite risks. And I'll tell you about that journey. So as you can see, I have been an entrepreneur in really a wide variety of environments. So let's talk about AT&T. So I would have lunch every day. One of the things I was thinking about when I was giving this talk, I probably know 12 people at AT&T that I worked with every day who start at lunch, who were good friends of mine, who I spent many nights in bars with, talking about how we were going to change the world. And many of them did. When you start looking at some of the neat power system products that are out there today. And I had a great mentor. His name was Jim Wallington, and I think the most underappreciated person in electronic power systems. He probably has 50 patents, and I was kind of his right-hand man, and maybe did a lot of his dirty work, but I was happy doing his dirty work because he was the smartest guy I ever met. And when you get to hang out with the real smart people, you know, I got to hang out with Jim, and he taught me everything I knew. And he had a vision. He had a vision that we were going to start in AT&T Lucent a business that provided power supplies for servers and storage equipment and other items. And this, because he looked at that and said, if we could get that high volume manufacturing, that we could reduce the cost of our low volume products and make lots of money from a contribution margin basis. Nobody liked the idea, but two folks did. One was the first person who was running the business. We were coming through a former general manager of the division who was really just concerned about winning a Deming Quality Award and really wasn't concerned about growing a business. And the new leader wanted to do something different. The second item is the sales force loved it. Because what do sales forces love? They love to have more products to sell. And when you start talking to them about building, you know, hundreds of thousands of items and that they would get so much commission, they were really motivated. So we had this idea. We were going to build these standard products, we were going to customize them, and we were going to be able to do it in a way that would generate lots of revenue, contribution margins would be high, people would be really happy, we thought. I would just say that this was an idea that was not liked by many people, and you know, trying to force this model into a low to mid volume manufacturing company probably wasn't the greatest idea in the world. But boy, we could sell. So we probably sold within the first year $100 million worth of products that people like IBM and Compaq Computer and Sun Microsystems, and we were off to the races. Vito's sitting back there, and Bill's sitting there. Part of the problem is they didn't always work. You know, when you do hardware, you know, you run into issues, and sometimes things don't work the way you think. And boy, did the bureaucracy come out for us, because the bureaucracy didn't like the fact we hired new designers all from the outside, that we actually got our own new manufacturing facility. The bureaucracy hated it. We were purchasing parts in the Far East. We were going into Shenzhen, China to get parts, and nobody was doing that in the organization. But so when there started being little issues, the knives came out. You know, the purchasing people were all over our case. Why would you buy product in the Far East? You can't get your chassis at the right dimension. We eventually figured out how to do it at a much lower cost, but it was really challenging. The manufacturing folks, who were the best folks at doing you in, because they knew how the system worked better than you knew any day of the week. And many of them were my friends. They were still out to get us, and they got us. And eventually, you know, this was not, you know, one of the items I was putting this together, I was chuckling to myself. The lawyers, 3 years after we shipped products and were done the production of a unit, the lawyers still didn't have the contracts in place because they weren't used to dealing with this complexity and dealing with enterprise customers. And eventually this business was absorbed by the standard business unit. So, you know, did we succeed? Well, we generated a lot of revenue. We generated contribution margin. But on that journey, I learned a lot. One, I look at the benefits of being an entrepreneur at AT&T. Being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you get your paycheck every week and know how it's coming in. Since AT&T, there hasn't been a dime I've been paid that I haven't figured out either how to help sell products or raise the funds to pay my salary. It's really kind of a cool feeling when you think about it, that you've been able to do that. Boy, it was easy to sell at AT&T. I probably found that after leaving AT&T. When you have AT&T brand, you can walk in and people would listen and they would buy from you. You could actually, you had that trust factor. And you could show this huge factory off and all this infrastructure that could support their efforts. That's not like a real startup company, but it was really kind of nice. Now, the bad thing about working in AT&T was that you could never align the mission. Here we were trying to force feed a new model. The accountants, I mentioned contribution margin, the accountants didn't buy contribution margins. They loaded it up, and the profit didn't look good, and they didn't care whether you were helping other aspects of the business. And in a very, very risk-averse organization, it's difficult to fail. On the other item, though, is that working at AT&T and going through this, boy, did I learn a lot, because I got beat. As I told you, I was kind of the bad guy for Jim. Vito became my bad guy. I eventually learned I didn't want that role anymore. But being at AT&T, I got beaten up so much. I got beaten up by the best of them. It really helped me develop thick skin, which actually made it easier to be an entrepreneur. I wrote this, "The bureaucracy ultimately won the battle," and I presented this to my organization some of my leadership last Thursday. It was volunteer. They could come see the CEO present, so they all showed up for lunch. How about that? So, my COO looked at that and said, "Andy, the bureaucracy didn't really win, because the industry went in the direction that you guys set out. And it ended up actually hurting that business, that they didn't follow the path." And I guess another item about being an entrepreneur at AT&T, even when you fail, you succeed. I got promoted. I got promoted because, people recognize we were one of the few people who were willing to do something new. And even though the bureaucracy didn't like it, they valued it. So that led us kind of to, the lessons learned from this is, because of all those beatings, I really believed in myself. And I think after we went through this, I began having a sense that the people we hung out with were really good. But I also learned that when you worked at AT&T in 1996, your whole world was AT&T. You joined the company and you died at the company. That was your 40-year career. I can remember when I joined the company, I wanted to become a technical director. And I eventually reached that point. And after being a technical director for 2 years, I said, this is it. There had to be more. But it was different. But bringing in and learning to deal with people from the outside who weren't AT&T, who thought differently than AT&T people, was an incredible, valuable experience. The other item is that I probably learned more in this experience, because they saved me a great deal, was align yourself with the sales team. Because when things aren't going great, the sales folks, if you're supporting them, they know how to fight the internal battles better than you'll ever know how to fight the internal battles. And they really kept us going. And this experience, as well as my SMU MBA experience, Duncan and I were sharing today that he wrote we went through this entrepreneurial class, and he wrote a business plan associated with starting a company for the entrepreneurial class. And I did the same. And Marilyn and George helped me present that and put that together. And that plan was what became Valier Power. And Valier was founded by three of us. Vito, I mentioned today. Greg Fasulo, who's now the CEO of a startup company called InTouch, which is really a cool company. We decided, the telecom industry was taking off. It's January 2001. Let's quit our job and start a DC power system company for telecom. And, for some of you in the audience, that's about when the telecom industry started tanking in March of 2001. We didn't really have a business idea. We had a product idea. I don't know if you agree, V, but we had a product idea. And we had a cool idea for products about how broadband should be powered. And the product was wow. The product was in our minds, was going to be half the size of the competition, dissipate half the heat. And you think about broadband applications and outdoor cabinets and sitting. This building here is probably powered by a Valier power system. We also put in what today is rudimentary advanced remote monitoring features, but it was there. You could either connect a LAN to it or RS-232. It was a real cool design. And we did something really unusual. We made it look good. And believe it or not, looking good in this industry was a differentiator. And we wrote a check to an industrial firm, $14,000, and they made it happen. So worst year to try to start a company. So Vito, Greg, and I, for about 7 or 8 months, would meet once a month and each write a $20,000 check to pay for the business. Vito's full-time job was to get us credit card debt. We had $200,000 in credit card debt. And we used to joke that if this company went down, we were all going to be living in our 2,000 square foot office for the next 5 years because that was the lease on that property. But, when I think about it, that was the best year of my life, next to marrying you, Kath. But, it was just special. We worked all sorts of hours. We did probably 200 meetings to raise funds, and nobody was giving us funds. I would go through these due diligence, and we were striking out. But we were still focused. But we raised a little money. Alcatel Ventures came in and put $1.5 million into the company. And I can remember the meeting, and we were in LA. He had a fellow named Steve Kim. He was actually second richest Korean American, and he formed a company called Xylan, which he sold to Alcatel, and then he started a fund which Alcatel invested in. And we sat with Steve, and he started asking questions, and we were supposed to be in another meeting, and I said to Greg, we're not going to the other meeting. We're staying here because he was the most interested. And he came to our office, and we had a buddy, Nader Kafai, and we didn't have any equipment. We didn't have anything. We had 5 employees. We didn't have any equipment. We had computers that always showed 1970 because the software we had at the time would expire if the date ever hit a certain date. So it was set to 1970. So we had the clock on automatic roll, so it was always 1970. And in my heart, it's 1970 even today. So we were able to, so we brought in, Nader drove up his truck, we put equipment in the lab, we made everything look like we knew what we were doing, we showed models, and Steve's a pretty smart guy. He said to me, okay, Andy, I'm going to give you money. This reminds me of my first startup. He started a company in a garage and called FiberMux, which he eventually sold at that time for $54 million. Then he hit a big billions at Xylan. So we got some money. But I'll never forget the night, I'm sitting there eating our Vietnamese soup because I had Vietnamese soup probably 700 times that year because it was cheap and we brought it in and it kept the employees. The young engineers lived on energy drinks and the old engineers would start drinking bourbon and water about 8 o'clock at night. And, we would just work. But I can remember staring at this system at 11 o'clock at night and I knew it didn't really work yet, but I knew we made it because I never saw a product that looked so good and felt so good and had the performance we had. So we had a strong value proposition. And then I told you we started really building a business. Our core expertise was sale and design. That's what we were good at. And, when I think about it, I'm not exactly proud of my behavior at Valier every day. I was really incredibly tough and difficult. I made the sales guys get on a call with me 15 minutes every day to explain what they were doing. And I was really difficult on them, and I was really difficult on the manufacturing folks. That's an apology, Vito. And, but I look back, but I would hire a salesperson and said, I'll give you a job for 3 months. If you don't sell $100,000 to new customers at the end of 3 months, you're fired. You want the job or not. And I was that direct with folks. And I turned the sales team 3 times until we got it right. But it was, we were on a mission. We could not fail. We were pretty smart about manufacturing. We outsourced most of the electronics. We knew China. We knew how to buy parts in China. You work at HP? Did somebody work at HP? I was at, HP. We essentially figured out we're HP contract manufacturers and used HP's, centric supplier list so that we could have good cost, good quality, and we were manufacturing, contract manufacturing in China, doing final assembly here in the States, and we had very little administrative overhead. Eventually, we hired a CFO who actually really helped us figure out how we could monetize the business, really beneficial to us. So what was the outcome? We grew this business in about 5-6 years to $90 million in revenue. Great customer list. So when I say today, probably when I left, 70% of broadband in the US was using this system for outdoor cabinets and customer prem. SBC, Verizon, we had a good deal with Nortel, if you folks remember them. T-Mobile. We sold the company to Eltec. Today it's owned by Dell Electronics. Still have a big presence in Dallas. They probably have 200 people in their headquarters in Dallas. Jobs, which I feel that the 3 of us created. And you're talking about the creative process, creating jobs. At Plug, which I'm going to talk to you about soon, the fact that over the last 3 years we've gone from 100 to 650 people, it's just a good feeling to create jobs. We built a good business. So what did I learn at Valier? In the Blues Brother, John Belushi comes in, and I don't know if some folks in here may have never seen the Blues Brother movie, but he says, we're on a mission from God. And we were on a mission. There was no way we were going to fail. And, it's hard to explain, but the passion we had. Another strength we had, even though we didn't have the company's brand, we had good brand with people in the industry. So we could attract good people. I talked about how at AT&T I hired all these people from the outside. Probably half of them came to work for us at Valier. So, it was really critical that we knew how to bring in talent. Customers respected us because of where we came from. And the established players were stagnant, even silly to an extent, right? I didn't mention that in one of the slides that, one of our VCs, we've raised about $60 million over the life of this company. One of the VCs called one of the established players and said they'll never succeed because they won't be able to get insurance. And, the VC thought to themselves, hey, these guys are going to get insurance, and thought to themselves, this is a good investment because these folks are in an industry which is kind of dead. And it was a kind of a dead because it was dominated by two players for 40 years. There was no new entrants. They didn't care. They thought they had it forever. And when we went, and I think it's one of the other advantages we had a value prop, but they were excited to see somebody was trying to do something new and different. And telecom folks like things which are new and different, especially in 2000. So one of the real disadvantages for Lear was no paycheck for a year. Biggest raise I ever got was when we stopped writing those $20,000 checks. We were newbies. We were good designers and pretty good at sales. We had no idea what we were doing when it came to things like, I can remember the first term sheet we got going through line by line. We didn't even understand what the words meant, and we're going back and forth. We didn't understand capital structures. We really didn't understand, organizational structures. I mean, we formed the company, I think January 12, 2001. We had to do it real quick overnight. We went online, DelawareCorp.com, and formed a company, and had to have it FedEx to us because we had to have that paper so we could be an official company. And it was tough starting in the downturn of an industry. But also, there were some benefits that I appreciated in the end. If the industry was really going strong, I don't think people would have taken the time to listen to us because they would have been too busy with everyday operations. And I think there were some side benefits to be starting in a bad time. And the other item was, unlike AT&T, we didn't have anything. We have built a sales channel. We actually built a real good sales channel with direct sales, distributors, integrators. We actually did a good job figuring that out, but we had nothing. But really the fact that we had an idea for a product and we were on a mission and we were going to figure out everything in between, and we learned a lot. And I think those learnings, one item was when I left AT&T, and to this day, I really want everybody I work with, myself, to want to come to work every day. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, I can't say that, I've been out AT&T 18 years. I can't say every day I have fun and enjoy it, but most days I have fun and enjoy it. And I want the people that I work with to feel the same way. We were focused. I used a focused business plan. We had a focused product and developed a focused business plan and didn't lose sight of what we were trying to accomplish. We sold value, and I think all the businesses I was involved with as an entrepreneur have tried to sell value. And we were aligned with good VCs. So when I look back in reflection, and they were good VCs. Sierra Ventures was a premier VC at the time. Great fellow who was our chairman. Alcatel Ventures. We had J.P. Morgan Partners in. We had Lehman Brothers in before Lehman Brothers did this. Interesting enough, the guy who signed off on the investment at Lehman Brothers, I actually deal with at Barclays today. So life is funny that way. But we were really right. If we made any mistakes, in 2005, 2006, we were starting to think about solar inverters. I didn't really do a good enough job in selling that to the board. Part of the problem with VCs is that they can become dysfunctional. So every one of my VCs had problems within their funds where I probably had a spy for every VC on the board. I probably had a spy inside the VC company who would call me after every board meeting. So it was really, I had Sierra Ventures in, and Jeff Drazen was spinning out to form a private equity firm. I had J.P. Morgan Partners, there was a Chase merger, and they were spinning out. I had Dowie Hook Partners, and the two partners were in deep arguments with each other every day. So it made it difficult to really move to the next level to really be able to keep that business going. That being said, it was a good outcome. We all made a little money, we had fun, and we learned a lot. And I thought the next best thing was go be a CEO of a public company. That'd be smart. So, I am, as Duncan said, and today is my 11th year anniversary, the CEO of Plug Power. And I joined Plug Power because there were infinite opportunities. I probably didn't realize when I signed the paper, I think I thought this was going to be a 3 to 4 year gig, that there were infinite challenges. And this business was around for a while. So as I mentioned, I'm going to tell you a little bit more later, but it was around for 11 years when I came and had lots of money poured into it and really had nothing. But, you know, when I think about the opportunities, and this wasn't nearly as clear today, but this comes from a McKinsey study that was done about 2 years ago. And, you know, Plug Power does fuel cells. So fuel cells run on hydrogen, right? So you take hydrogen in, you create it to electricity, and, you know, very much like a battery, empowers devices. It's a little nicer in some ways than batteries because you fill it like you would fill an automobile. So you pull up to it, you fill it up with hydrogen. Really cool. And there's a lot of need for hydrogen in industrial processes. But you know, McKinsey believes 19% of the energy in the world will come from hydrogen by 2050. There'll be 7 gigaton of hydrogen, carbon dioxide reduction a year. There'll be 45 million jobs and 4 trillion. So I'm involved in the McKinsey US study, and I said to them, Americans don't care about 2050. You know, when we think about, you know, this is a global study. When you think about Americans, it's what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years. And the industry actually will be moving ahead in the next 4 or 5 years. I think one of the big items is that big companies are investing $40 billion a year into this industry today. People like Toyota, people like Air Liquide, people like Air Products, people like Shell Oil, people like Exxon, all are beginning to invest in this segment. Shell has a huge R&D facility for hydrogen in Geneva they just put in place. So this business is starting today. So this is the opportunity. I could have not have told you this in 2008, whenever I started at Plug. Because when I was in 2008, it would be I would drive down the road and I'd see a golf cart and say, a fuel cell can be used there, or a fuel cell can be used there. Now it's really structured, and you know, you can actually start developing market plans. And at Plug, just to kind of tell you a story, it was a joint venture between Detroit Edison and MTI. GE was a huge investor. GE put about $200 million into this company. We had Russian investors. The guy who owns the new Brooklyn Nets was one of the big investors in Plug Power. You know, this company at one time had an $8 billion market cap. At one time during my time at Plug, it had a $10 million market cap. Just to tell you kind of the roller coaster ride. Today it's about $650. It was another good stock day. But when I joined this company in 2008, we had $1 million in commercial revenue. Last year, just to give you a feel, we did 185 million. We were chasing, you know, fuel cells, not a fuel cell, not a fuel cell. We were chasing 3 different technology sets and 5 different markets. And I decided to focus the business on material handling. And so your probably first question is, what's material handling? And so let me try to tell you. So what we do for a living today, plus I'm going to tell you what we're doing for the future, is that we go into distribution centers and we take out your lead acid battery, we replace it and put a fuel cell in the exact spot the lead acid battery would be. We also, it wasn't our original plan, we also built the hydrogen fueling stations associated with it. as well as provide the aftermarket service, leveraging the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, some really cool items. And, but why did, as I mentioned, we're Americans. We think about how do you create value. And so why would a customer do that? And early on, we had 10 units at Walmart. And they explained to me, by eliminating the battery change-out process, they saved about 30 minutes a shift because of how long it took to take the lead-acid battery out, put it on a shelf, smoke breaks for the guys, right? I mean, it's a good way to kind of, goof off, right? The battery room was kind of a goof-off point for the business, too. Also, with a fuel cell, they ran at constant power, constant performance throughout the shift. We also eliminated about 6 to 7% of the floor space for the battery room. So you start thinking about that. It cost Walmart about $90 million to build a new distribution center. So you start thinking of all that there is a real value proposition that could be had. And so there was a value prop. So we could see how we could make Walmart money. We also could see, because the market was big enough, there's 6 million forklift trucks out there. And we could see where about 2 million of them could use our fuel cells. So it was a big enough niche market, and it is a niche market, that we could start building a business to drive down our costs and improve the performance and learn about the business. And so our belief was that we could drive down the cost. And that's turned out to be true. Not to jump ahead of slides, but every time we double the number of units in the field, we reduce our cost by 26%. So we're really are on aggressive learning curves. And something that most people wouldn't think about, everything about fuel cells has to do with hydrogen and why aren't there more fuel cell cars on the road? Because there aren't more hydrogen stations. We recognize we had to go into a market where we could put as much hydrogen in place as a futuristic gas station would need. So we were targeting distribution centers and manufacturing centers with hundreds of forklift trucks. And that hydrogen system you could afford because, like any asset, if you're using it, the cost for each time you're using it is less. And that's why we focused on this business. And we were a little different, and I thought about this slide. So much different than Valier. We became a horizontally integrated business. Never was our intention. So why? I talked about sales and the importance of sales. I talked about Walmart, and Walmart said to me, and by the way, anybody here who buys food in Walmart in the Dallas area, their products moved on a Valier product. When we looked at it, Walmart said to me, Andy, we're never going to buy anything from you unless you provide the aftermarket service and the hydrogen. And know why? Because when there's an industry that has about a $0 TAM, nobody's interested in the creative process but the people trying to create the business. So we shook our heads and said, oh, sure, we'll build hydrogen stations. Sure, we'll provide aftermarket service. We had no service network. We didn't know how to build hydrogen stations. But since nobody else was interested in doing it for us cost effectively, we had to do it ourselves. When it came to manufacturing, every step of the way I resisted, we had to become vertically integrated. I didn't used to make my own stacks. I raised my hand and said, okay, we'll make our own stacks. I didn't used to make our own plates for stacks, which is the critical components. I make plates today. I didn't used to make membranes. I bought a company. I learned how to make fuel cell membranes. And the reason was nobody wanted to really build out the industry at the right cost. If we didn't do it, we wouldn't be around. And it's really kind of, I think that when I think about from building a business point of view, it just shows that, both at Valier and at Plug, we really had to face reality. And be very flexible how you can get the sale. So how have we done? We have 25,000 units in the field, more than anyone else in the world. Plug Power is the biggest user of liquid hydrogen, surpassing NASA last year. I'm also the largest manufacturer of fuel cell membranes in the US, which I don't have on this slide. And in those hydrogen stations we didn't know how to do, we've done 18.5 million fuelings. In the fourth quarter, after 21 years of existence, Plug Power had an EBITDA positive quarter and actually generated some cash. So we're on our way. So, you know, but as you can guess, even though I'm still young at heart, I'm getting older, I still haven't given up. So I want that infinite opportunity. And so why would anybody use a fuel cells when batteries are so great? First, I'll have to say, everybody in here who's around in 2040, most everybody will be driving a vehicle that runs on electric motors. You'll actually be flying in electric taxis around Dallas because electric motors are fundamentally, to build an electric car is fundamentally going to be lower cost than building a car based on internal combustion engine. And today, when you look at total cost of ownership, people believe electric cars are lower in Europe today than internal combustion engine cars. Expected to happen in 2023 in China, in 2027 in the United States. And fundamentally, if they're electronics, they're going to be lower cost and more reliable. That's just the way it is. I think another item is you hear all this about self-driven cars and autonomous vehicles. You're going to put an internal combustion engine in and have, you know, one thing you learn from being a power system engineer, you try to have one power architecture to power the whole car. With the internal combustion engine, you're going to have an internal combustion engine and an electric system and all that complexity when you can have one simple infrastructure. Anybody who's ever gone to a Tesla showroom, you stare at that. Isn't that a lot simpler than your car? So why wouldn't everybody just do electric vehicles with batteries? One of the reasons is that, especially for commercial vehicles, fuel cells have 10 times the power density. You know, I'm a huge Elon Musk fan. This Class 8 type truck he's advertising is the most ridiculous thing in the world. That truck's going to be filled with batteries to get any range. I mean, and how much, I was told by the Port of Long Beach, they have 80 Class 8 trucks in one facility. They have enough power that goes in that facility to power one truck. So, you know, electric doesn't work when you start thinking about when you really start thinking about large type vehicles. And the Chinese know it. So the Chinese, many people may not know this, biggest sellers of battery electric vehicles. China put 1.3 million on the road last year. They've cut their subsidies for battery electric vehicles and have moved fuel cell electric vehicles to the point where the subsidies equal the cost of an internal combustion engine. So the Chinese, who have had more experience with electric vehicles than anyone else in the world, recognize fuel cells has a point. And the 2022 Olympics is going to be a fuel cell Olympics in Beijing. So just watch. And Plug Power, I promise you will be there. And then when you think about the future, you know, you hear all this stuff about sharing economy. Well, in Dallas, you actually could envision it. Where I live in upstate New York, we don't really have people. So, you know, sharing economy isn't exactly what you think about. But if you think about New York cities and cabs on a road 18, 19 hours a day, don't you want those cabs out there for the maximum amount of time? And with a fuel cell, you just put a bigger hydrogen tank in. For a fuel cell, they have to pull up to one station. I've seen analysis that show the cost of hydrogen infrastructure after you get past 15 vehicles is cheaper than putting in electrical vehicle infrastructure for facilities. We find that with forklift trucks. As my good buddy at Walmart, who really helped create this company, told me, if you're building a new facility, it's a no-brainer just to put fuel cells in because you eliminate all the complexity of batteries. And just like, so you know, in 2035, these automatic guided vehicles that Toyota and Hyundai are putting on the road, Toyota has 5,000 fuel cell cars running in California at the moment, are going to be fuel cells. That is part of our future. There's good, if you're a typical car user, use car 4% of the time. That's how much we use our cars, most of us. Batteries are the answer. So there's going to be a mix of technologies. And as I said, we're ideal for asset-intense logistic applications. So how we're doing it, little advertisements. Again, a little bit different, going to standard products. We're trying to figure out how to have 4 engines, which power 4 different items. I have a FedEx vehicle on the road that has about 20,000 miles on it today. I'm about to put some vehicles on the road in Germany in the near future. So we're going to have 4 boxes, and my chairman wants one of those boxes to power an electric taxi, and might happen. So, there is a real, we've actually kind of, again, changing our business. We're thinking about how we're going to sell. Today I sell direct. Again, being flexible, we're beginning to develop OEM relationships. We're beginning to talk to channel partners. And how to build a flexible business is really important when you're dealing with a new technology. So the advantage of Plug, it's like most things with Plug, things are advantages and things are disadvantages. So being a public company is really, really tough when you're trying to build a business. And that's a real, real negative. On the positive, we would not be around if we weren't a public company because we can always sell stock. There's always someone who's willing to give you money. And with a public company, it's liquid. You may not like the cost of that money, but there's always ways to get money. As I mentioned, being a company where there's no market to start, partnerships are really difficult. But, when it came to supply chain, when it came to other areas, it was tough. But I found 3 good partners along the way. Air Liquide saved me when I had no money. So February 14th, 2013, I did this horrible transaction. Our stock price was 10 cents. Today the stock price is $2.75. So it was a horrible transaction. The knives were out for us, so other companies wanted to acquire us. I was driving home. Matter of fact, my buddies at Walmart called it the Valentine's Day Massacre because it was really bad. The phone rang. It was the fellow who ran hydrogen for Air Liquide. And he asked me, Andy, what do you need? I said, I need $6 million. I need you to put in at about 3x the market value of the company. And they did it and saved us. And why did they do it? Not because they were just good guys, because they actually understood the value of the hydrogen economy long term and what we were doing. I had during that time, I developed another friend who's become my good friend. He's a 40-year-old guy, and he's half Korean, he's half German, real strange mixture. Probably he would tell me he grew up as an outcast in Germany when he was growing up. But God was he smart. He went to college and worked the Frankfurt Stock Exchange when he was 19 years old. Has started many companies. Again, it's somebody I just kind of met along the way. And he said to me, Andy, can I help you? I say, would you join the board and put some money in the company? And he did. And the third folks who really helped us was Walmart. Walmart had vision. Walmart probably gets a bum rap many places, but Walmart had vision that no other company I talked to really understood. And today, we're in 38 Walmart distribution centers. They have over 8,000 of our units, and they were a real, real good partner. The other thing at Plug is, the government, and this is different. I know my friends, I now give to both parties, which my friends know must kill me. I won't tell you which way. For those in the audience, those who know me are chuckling. I've actually had fundraisers in my house for both parties, and if you Google online, you'll never figure out what my political views are. But the politicians actually of both parties have helped Plug. We had tax credits put in place to help grow this industry. And ultimately, those tax credits will go away. But I learned a lot about the political process and how to work with the Department of Energy, how to work with our congressional folks. I know everybody thinks Congress is completely dysfunctional, but sometimes they can be really helpful. And, there's actually a lot of smart people from both parties there. So I can tell you this business is becoming more complex as we go into other areas, but it was, the two items I think are really the partnerships and the stock, and they just cut both ways. So what did I learn at Plug? I mentioned Walmart. You need to find customers who dream big. You've probably heard of my second biggest customer, Amazon. So, Amazon has over about 5,000 of our units. They were willing to think big too. BMW has about 1,000 of my units. It's not for the faint of heart. I've put here, we were trying to manage kind of a real difficult trifecta of issues. The technology that kind of worked, no sales, no markets, and that's really what we had to sort through in forming Plug. And it really required rigorous focus. I explained to people at Plug, I'm not the risk taker they think. Within this material handling market, I took every risk possible. Not because we wanted to take all the risk, because there was no other choice. There was no other possibility. Outside of material handling, I took no risk because we only had so many dollars. We could only build one market, and people came to me constantly with ideas for other markets, but we knew we had to stay focused. And we have hired some really good people at Plug. But like the sales team at Valier, I've turned my management team 3 times till I got it right. So as an entrepreneur, and I'll finish this up because you've all been really generous with your time, that when I think about the different experiences, there's experience from a company point of view. And the market opportunity at AT&T, even though it was a really big company, was really limited because of the mission of the company. Not because the mission was wrong. It just was the mission of the company didn't align with our mission. And at Plug, the opportunities really are unlimited. This company will be a major force way after I'm gone, whether it's part of another company or not. What we've done has been really special. And it's hard really to talk about it. Valier, it was a VC exit. It was a good exit. It was a limited market. It was just the way it was. From a mission alignment, Valier was easy. Vito and Bill may be chuckling there. It was really easy, guys, compared to other things. Because we all knew we were all the same dream. We quit our jobs. We joined Valier. We built a company. We knew what we were doing. We fought among ourselves. But, it was a love affair. I got to tell you, and I left Dallas and I said to myself, I would never fall in love with another company again. I was going to be a straight businessman, boom, boom, boom. I've absolutely fallen in love with Plug Power. I love what I do every day. I love what our people do every day. I love the creative process. I have 2 mistresses in life. One is Valier and one is Plug Power. And it's just what we've done is so unusual and so special, and hardware is so hard versus software. We really have built products that make a difference. And from a personal point of view, I didn't know it, but there were no risk at AT&T. At Falier, there were crazy risks. We could have gone out of business every day, but we didn't. And after that first year, we were off to the races. And at Plug, there was some risk, but look, I was established. First, personally, I was established by then. I knew how to raise money. I always know how to get money, for good or bad. So it was really, it's really a different. Not that there aren't many frustrating days, and I was mentioning when our market cap was 10 million, but built friendships and partnerships along the way. I think your partners actually end up being your friends. I think it's really important. And from a work satisfaction point of view, Falier was great, but the constant creativity, good and bad at Plug, really, I find great satisfaction out of. So for all you future entrepreneurs out there, most of you are in here I would suggest don't do it at a big company. Don't do it at a public company. But when I started Falier, I didn't understand risk. I didn't understand risk at AT&T. I think we became, and with the management team, I kind of learned how to balance success and risk. And I mentioned about how we stay so focused at Plug, but I think that that ability to stay focused and thinking about how small markets can grow into big markets is really kind of what has differentiated us at Plug. And I guess finally, I've had a lot of expert help. I have a great board. I mean, my chairman's the biggest dreamer of the world. I mean, he was if you know iRobot, he was the lead director for iRobot and was one of the original investors in iRobot. He's been probably on 50 boards in his life. He's just a creative guy. And I've been just so lucky to deal with talented people, both on boards and tech or in other areas. And as I tell my nephews and nieces, the best thing you can do in life is go join a company where there's a lot of smart people and hang out with them. And you begin looking a lot smarter when you're with smart people. So I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for allowing me to come down and spend 45 or 50 minutes with you with this talk. So thanks again.
Andy, will you take a couple questions?
Sure.
We always have some.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Pat.
So what's the output of your fuel cell?
What's that?
What's the output of your fuel cell?
It depends. That's a typical engineering answer. But Bill's so most of our units are run either 48 volts, 24, 36. They go up to about 15 kilowatts in power for those used in material handling. For the delivery van product, it's 36 kilowatts, and I think it's 380 volts DC.
So Andy, you remained focused on material handling, but in retrospect, would you have made a different decision looking back?
Actually, no.
No?
No, and I tell you why. I actually did a lot of homework before we made that decision. I spent probably the first 9 months on the road talking to people who were doing backup power, were doing residential power for home, commercial power, on-road vehicles. It was only one that I could see that we could, I made a mention of hydrogen, and it was the only one that I could understand how we could bring hydrogen to a site and support a customer's efforts. And it was the only one that I could build a value proposition where I could charge more for the product than the conventional technology that we thought we could build a business around. In retrospect, I would have been more niche oriented. I would have focused just on food and retail instead of manufacturing. The products for manufacturing were more complex and diverse, and I think the quality and performance of our products would have been better off early on if I even was more focused. Yeah. Yes?
How many states and
how many states? I think we're in 38 states, and we're probably in about 10, 12 countries today. So, we have 650 employees. About 250 of them are in upstate New York. I have a design center in Spokane, Washington. I have a service center in Chicago, Illinois. I have one in Dayton, Ohio. And I have a kind of a final assembly center in the Netherlands. And it's soon to be in China and other places. Yes?
How long before independent hydrogen generation will substitute for air gas and air heat?
So we do today some on-site generation where we actually take natural gas and convert to hydrogen. I think that there's going to be a real mix of hydrogen. So there's a lot of work going on, and especially in Europe at the moment and China, where electrolyzers are being used to kind of manage the excess renewable power on the grid. And a lot of people are actually beginning to talk about West Texas. Can you put electrolyzers out there, generate hydrogen, and then truck it here into the areas where it's needed? So I think the hydrogen, by the way, Air Liquide and Air Gas are one company today. So I mean, essentially the big guys are becoming bigger. And what you're seeing is there's lots, I spoke to Edmund here, and he's part of a company that's thinking he works with a company, First Element in California, that does a lot of the fueling stations out there. I know they're thinking a lot about generation. I think that you'll see with Plug we'll do more and more of our own generation on site for customers, either with electrolyzers or with natural gas. And eventually that'll be biofuels. Yes?
Do you have partnerships with the vehicle manufacturers, the actual lifts and things?
For the forklifts, so one of the lessons I learned at Valier was when you have a market that's tight, work around the integrators to start. So we went directly to Walmart. We went directly to Amazon. We went directly to BMW. We went directly to Mercedes. And they told Raymond and Crown, Yale Heister, you have to use their products. And we essentially created the end demand to really stimulate the market. So we work with all them. We're qualified. We're probably qualified in 10 different forklift truck manufacturers. In Europe, we've been working closely with Linde, and we have a distributor agreement with Linde. In Europe, we have a distributor agreement with Toyota. The vehicle market's going to be different, and we're beginning to work with some integrators. And I've mentioned there'll probably be some press releases about that coming out soon. Yes?
Hi, Mr. Marsh. My name is Kathy Hubbard. I work with our undergraduate students. I don't quite see that many here.
Where are you?
No, we need to get you in front of them.
Yeah.
I just sense a lot of optimism in your talk.
Yeah.
But in your AT&T experience, you said that you were arrogant.
Oh, yeah. So I'll I don't know if you may not know what Bell Labs was. Yeah, I was about to say. So, this is what we thought at Bell Labs. The C students went into sales, the B students worked at Western Electric, and the A students were hired by Bell Laboratories. And that's who we thought we were, and we were treated real well. We had a Bell Labs store that you could go into and could take anything you want. So if you were a Bell Labs employee in 1985, if you wanted a Mac computer because you were a Bell Labs employee, you got a Mac computer. So they kind of trained you to be a little bit arrogant. And I fit right in. And then I got chopped down once, chopped down twice, chopped down 3 times, and you got this. So I still have a bit of a healthy ego. I wouldn't be here talking to you if I did. Yes.
So at Plug Power, you created a market.
Yeah, we created a market.
You created, well, okay, so
Yeah.
we created a market.
Yeah.
Stimulated demand. at some point the market explodes. Is Plug Power, does it have the capacity to scale? Is it scalable? Can you scale up fast enough?
That's a good question, Steve. It's tell you what the toughest challenge is scaling up is aligning the management employees to give up something of what they're doing, right? So it is difficult to give something up. And at one time at Plug, I was the CFO, I was the head of IR, I was the head of development, I was everything at one bad period. The chairman came to me, and it was really good advice. He said, Andy, your job's going to split many times over. And it isn't my fear about how to scale up manufacturing, how to scale up design. We're pretty good at those things, and we have, but it's how to say to a fellow who maybe runs our service business, you got to give it up so you can focus more on manufacturing. And the person who runs finance and IR, you got to give up IR so we can hire an IR person. It's how to get people to be willing to understand as you grow. You need to bring other people into the organization who can help expand your thought process, can help focus you, and help build a business from there. But that to me has been, and intellectually everybody knows that's what we got to do to scale. But whoever wants to give up, you got to remember, these are great people, and they think they can do everything. And getting them to admit that, yes, they can do everything, and yes, but we may be able to bring somebody in who's a little better at this one aspect of what you do. And that's tough. Yes?
Andy, did you personally make the contact with Walmart and make the sale to Walmart? And if so, what was the tipping point for them? What caused them to move in your direction?
So it started before I actually came there, Bobby. And but it became my personal, because I kind of recognized it was our route to success. And amazing thing about Walmart, the people I dealt with 11 years ago were the same people I deal with today. They got promoted along the way because of what we did for them. So I went from having 10 units with Walmart to 63 units with Walmart. And then we convinced them to cut over one distribution center. And talk about issues. I had issues everywhere. And a lot had to do with, I have one partner who delivered bad hydrogen and took everything down over Labor Day weekend. And that's not exactly a good time to be down in Walmart. But we flew in all new parts and everything else, and we were there Saturday building it up. And then Jeff Smith and fellow Mike Buckley, who are now VP and director level, I had a conversation with them, and they said to me, I asked them, what would it take? And they said, you need to be at this price, you need to build the hydrogen stations, and you need to provide the aftermarket service. And I said, well, if I do that, will you give me 6 distribution centers? And that's how we went from being at 1 distribution to 7 distribution centers to now we do 10 a year with them. But I am a salesman at heart. With Amazon, I have a great VP of sales now. He worked it, but ultimately it was me and him that did the high-level sale. But I think sales isn't that hard. You listen to customers, you understand what customers want, and then you figure out if you can do it. And if you can do it, you try to deliver it.
We have refreshments outside, so you can follow up with Andy some more. But I think we should thank our speaker, and I'd like to give you a little gift.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
Okay.